The Miami Hurricanes are going to the Final Four. Evan Miyakawa is here to explain it. He's with evanmiya.com, an analytics website. I'm excited to get into this. So let's hear you explain it, Evan.
Yeah, so I did a bracket simulation last week that got some buzz because it had Miami going to the Final Four. Now, the thing that many people don't understand is that a bracket simulation does not mean it's a prediction, but it is one possible outcome out of many other outcomes that could happen based on the strength of each team, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just as likely as any other outcome we could see. In that simulation, we saw Indiana, Arkansas, and Arizona all being taken down by Miami on the way to the Final Four. So maybe it's meant to be.
Yeah, and we'll see. And certainly a lot of buzz, a lot of excitement. Miami, the co-conference champions, first time that they've claimed a conference championships there since 2013. They're getting ready to get started in the ACC tournament. They're going to take on Wake Forest, but ultimately it's been a good season for Miami. 24-6, the 15-5 record in the ACC. Let's go with the strengths. Anything can happen in March Madness and once the NCAA tournament happens. But clearly, let's stay with the strengths. What are some things that you like about this Miami team? What stands out to you when you look at your website and the analytics there?
Well, obviously, Miami's offense is one of the absolute best in the country. I have them just outside the top 10 nationally. Defense is a little bit more of a question mark, 127th nationally. But if we stay on the topic of offense, one of the things that I really like is how balanced this offensive attack is. When you look at the individual players that Miami has, I have this metric at my website called Bayesian Performance Rating, which quantifies overall impact on both ends of the court. And Jordan Miller, Isaiah Wong, and Nigel Pack are the top three offensive players in the ACC per that metric, and Norchad Omier is fifth. So they're stacked. And when you look at even just the production level, you've got four players all averaging double-digit points per game. And the other thing, too, that I really like about Miami, and I think this could be a huge strength of theirs in the tournament, is they have the most 10-0 runs per game in the ACC. So I have this metric called the kill shot, which measures how many times in a game a team goes on a 10-0 or better run in a game. So that's kind of a way of quantifying spurtability, if you will. And Miami is the best of any team in the ACC at doing that. They've had 21 of these 10-0 or better runs this year. That's close to one per game. Which basically means they're never out of a game, whether they're behind and they're trying to come back, or they are, trying to hold down a lead. They could, go on a run at any moment. I think that definitely lines up with, the pieces that they have, and that's something to watch come tournament time.
Well, let's go back to the offensive things that you talked about there. And the one thing, again, just kind of providing more analysis to what those guys are. They all get their points. They all do it offensively in different ways. Omier inside, the guards is shooting from Pack and driving by Wong, and Miller filling in as that left-handed guy, kind of do it at all type of guy. How important do you think that balance is for these teams? Look, anything can happen in the tournament. Matchups are always a big deal, but how important is that? And maybe can you define why that is important to have that kind of diversity, and have that offensive output going into games in the tournament?
Yeah, the more I've looked into this Miami team, the more I really, really like the balance that they have. I mean, Miller and Wong, they get the headlines. Isaiah Wong, obviously, all the awards that he's won. Nigel Pack being, a very high heralded transfer this offseason. But the two guys that I actually have rated even higher than them in terms of their overall impact for this team are Jordan Miller and Norchad Ormier, who, maybe aren't quite as flashy, but the impact that they've had, not just in terms of their individual numbers, but also in terms of how well the team has performed when they're on the court, it's night and day difference. Norchad Omier is, by far the best, has the best defensive rating on the team outside of that offensive impact. And Jordan Miller, I think, people are only really starting to appreciate how good he is and the impact that he has, especially since he wasn't the first name that you saw, in that starting lineup at the beginning of the season, because other players got more spotlight. But he's been absolutely incredible. So when you look at those four guys and the fact that you can have one or two of those players having an off night and you still have other options that are super reliable, it just means I think come tournament time, it's going to be really hard to not count this team out or it's going to be hard to count this team out because they have multiple guys on any one night. If all of them are clicking or even three out of the four are clicking, it's a very hard matchup for anybody.
You touched on the offensive numbers, and that's been high essentially wherever you look. Your website definitely does a great job of that all season long. They've been considered a really good offensive team, and they've just been hovering kind of at that 10 mark throughout, just one of those good teams defensively. Evan, you mentioned it, some weaknesses or maybe some things that could catch Miami in the tournament. Defensively, the numbers aren't great. What kind of stands out to you defensively, or maybe some other things that maybe some weaknesses that Miami has?
Yeah, so I mentioned their defensive ranking outside the top 100, and a lot of teams or a lot of people like to mention when looking for teams that can go deep in March, having a balanced offensive and defensive attack certainly is important. That doesn't mean it's impossible for a team with a weak defense to go far, but that certainly can be a crutch for many teams who are loaded offensively, but defensively have a hard time stopping people. So that's definitely a concern for Miami. And I think the other thing too is that they seem to a lot of their game performances really do rely heavily on how they do on the offensive boards. So one of the things that I've added recently to my site is this Keys to Victory report. It's an automated report for each team that basically looks at different stats that you would see on the team sheet, or rather in the box score, and determining what factors are most important to this particular team's success in comparison to other teams. And the big one that jumped out to me today as I was looking at this is when Miami out-rebounds the other team. In particular, they have a better offensive rebound percentage. They're 20-1 this season. They've only lost one game. And when they lose that rebound battle, they're only 4-5. So that's been a huge differentiator for them between success in games and not. So that's something that I would really pay attention to. They really need to lock in terms of winning the rebound battle, especially crashing the offensive boards and limiting the other team to do so. And that could be a telltale sign of whether they're going to have success or not.
Yeah, and Coach Larinaga mentioned that in that last game when they beat Pittsburgh to clinch the share of the title. They 42-20, I think, was the mark. They out-rebounded Pittsburgh, and it was certainly an impressive performance. And Miami is not known for its rebounding because they're undersized, but they get it done. Like you mentioned, the multiple times that they've been able to out-rebound their opponents. Evan, can you speak more about your site a little bit? I know you touched on something about this new thing that you've done. You've also gone premium. Can you explain to people that are watching right now? We're going to keep this thing going with some Miami stuff, but can you just quickly explain kind of what you got going on right now with the site?
Sure, yeah. So the quick version is that there's a good amount of free stuff on the website. So player ratings for all D1 players, team ratings, that sort of thing. Bracket simulations, which you can get access to with the official bracket after Selection Sunday if you want to fill out some brackets using bracket simulations. But then I've got two different levels of subscriptions based on how far into the details you want to get. There's a $5 a month tier that gets you access to a lot of stuff. And then the $20 a month tier, which I have a special for actually right now at a discounted rate just for the month of March, gets you access to this new Keys to Victory tool, as well as some really advanced lineup stuff. So again, there's something for everyone based on your level of interest. But, whether the more serious fans, as well as lots of coaches, are really excited about the services here and are just, really trying to tap into that. So there's something for everybody.
Yeah, and there's a lot. I like going through everything, but I really like the lineup stuff, and we're going to get into that. Isaiah Wong, ACC Player of the Year, narrowly kind of gets by Wake Forest's Tyree Appleby. They're going to face each other in the tournament there. What stands out to you about Isaiah? And obviously, too, a guy that was part of their Elite Eight run last year, and he played well in the tournament. So that's got to be a lot of confidence for him, knowing that he's done well at the tournament. But what stands out to you with his numbers?
Yeah, when you talk about guys who can lead a team both from a production standpoint and just in terms of veteran presence, mentality, and impact and overall team performance, Isaiah Wong kind of has it all. As I mentioned earlier, he's averaging his great numbers, 16 points per game, 4 rebounds, 3 assists. His shooting numbers are good, steals as well. But when you look even outside of his box score statistics and just how well the team is playing overall, their team is night and day better with him offensively when he's on the court, which isn't really a surprise, but it's not always a given. The team, when you look at his on-off splits, they're averaging 11 points per 100 possessions more offensively when he's on the court versus not. That's a huge difference. So it's not just his stats. He's also impacting the game in big ways. And so, there's a reason why he's rated so highly. And he's one of those guys who, especially given their Elite Eight run last year, he's got experience doing this before. So I love his position on this team. It's a really, really important piece for them.
And I think that's one of the fun things about diving into numbers and analytics of sites like yourself, where look, you know what he's worth, and but to see it, explained, essentially passing the eye test, or maybe what you think of him, of a player, the perspective you have on him, and then backing it up with some analytics stuff, diving more into it. I always find that fascinating. Jordan Miller is another guy. I know you mentioned him earlier. We've talked throughout the season a little bit. You've sent me messages about where Jordan ranks, and you mentioned him at the top here about him. And just on accounting numbers, statistics, he actually outscored Isaiah Wong in ACC play narrowly. So that just kind of shows his value there. But what stands out to you about Jordan? Can you explain again where he kind of ranks amongst players on your site?
Yeah, so Jordan Miller is in the top 100 nationally, seventh in the ACC in overall Bayesian performance rating. Again, it's this metric that quantifies overall player value, not just in terms of big flashy things like scoring, but also the not often cited statistics and just things that are outside the box score, glue guy type effort, hustle plays, that sort of thing. It's all encapsulated there. And I think something that's key for Jordan Miller is similar to Isaiah Wong. The team is playing at its best when he's on the court. One thing it's in particular is when you look at one of the lineup statistics that my website has is quantifying how much chemistry each pair of teammates has. And so when you look at Miami's top teammate duos, if you will, in terms of how well the team is playing on the court, the duo with the highest chemistry, which basically means that the team is playing far better than you would expect when these two players are on the court compared to their individual averages, is Jordan Miller and Omir, which is really cool because those are the two guys who aren't necessarily the first names on the scout sheet, but they have made a massive difference. And when they're on the court together, Miami is playing far better than you would expect just based on their individual performances alone. So that's a really great sign. I think in general, too, I give credit to Larinaga and the coaching staff because they're not playing many of their worst performing lineups or combinations of players. So a lot of times you'll see a team, you look into their lineup statistics, they'll have some lineups that are performing well, others that are performing poorly, but they're still playing a lot. And the staff has seemed to identify the combinations of players and lineups that are working the best and avoiding the bad ones. And so that's a huge credit to the coaching staff. Hopefully that means they're more optimized for tournament play than other teams that they're going to face.
It is fascinating to see that. And some of the times you're like, oh, if they would just go with this lineup, the numbers back it up. But it is hard because there's a lot of factors on coaching and actually placing the players out there. But yeah, no surprises there. And Miami's had the same starting lineup all, from start to finish. A few injuries here and there, but it's been a spot thing. They've had their five, and Jim Larinaga has shown his best teams have those guys. He knows everyone has their roles in place. Who are some other guys? We've talked about the top four quite a bit already. You've mentioned some great things on these guys. Who are some other guys? Miami's got some key guys on the bench. Wooga Poplar had the big performance as that fifth starter, actually led the team in scoring against Pittsburgh. But are there some other either lineup stuff or some other guys maybe that stand out to you as maybe some keys, even if they don't get a lot of minutes?
Yeah, so you mentioned the five-man lineup there. The one that's been the best for Miami over 50 possessions this year has been the lineup of Miller, Omir, Pack, plus Beverly and Joseph. Now, they've only played 56 possessions, which isn't a ton, but they're far and away Miami's most efficient lineup when you adjust for the quality of opponents faced by that lineup. For context, that starting lineup that you mentioned that's played a lot has played over 600 possessions, so that's about 10 times more of a sample size. But I'd be really curious to see if that lineup with Beverly and Joseph coming off the bench can have an impact, maybe change a game in the tournament, because it's been really good. I would like to see it more.
Yeah, and plenty more information. I would just kind of urge everybody that either is really excited about college basketball or this Miami team, because as I mentioned, Evan says Miami's going to the Final Four. So get on board, get excited about this team. Evan, I'm always excited to talk to you, and best of luck with March Madness and everything you got going on at the site. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Chris.